Hi, and welcome to a small, medium, at large podcast. I'm your host, Gail Heisen, bringing you intimate interviews beyond normal boundaries. I want to thank all you listeners for joining us today on what I believe is our 120th show. So, let me tell you a little bit about our special guest here today. Our special guest today is John.kruth. John.kruth is the executive director of the Rhine Research Center. The Rhine Research Center explores the frontiers of consciousness and exceptional human experiences in the context of unusual and unexplained phenomena. The Rhine's mission is to advance the science of parapsychology, to provide education and resources for the public, and to foster a community for individuals with personal and professional interests in psi. John.kruth is also the educational director of the Rhine Research Education Center. He is the editor of the Journal of Parapsychology and a member of the board of the Parapsychological Association. He has numerous publications and has spoken at professional conferences and other forums regarding scientific parapsychology, the history of the Rhine, the nature of energy healing, poltergeists, and other topics related to parapsychology and the paranormal. Since 2010, John has developed the Rhine into a global organization that provides online courses, resources, and open forums for experiencers and scientists who are looking for reliable and professional information about parapsychology. He is a researcher, an educator, and a leader with a passion for maintaining the integrity of the field of parapsychology while encouraging outreach to the curious and casual explorers in the world. You can follow John's work at www.rhine.org, which I will spell out for some of you listeners. It's www.rhine.org. I do want to welcome John here today and also mention that he is a wonderful friend, and we just got to see each other recently in Virginia at the Acorn Conference. So let's welcome John here today. Hi, John.
Hi, Gail. It's always great to see you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. And I have to say, we've seen each other at so many different conferences in different places around the country, and now we're in each other's living rooms.
Yes, with so many different types of music involved in the background
Yes,
of these, which is
yes,
wonderful.
it's wonderful. I look forward to the next one.
Yes.
So, uh, I have a whole bunch of questions first that have to deal with the history of the Rhine research, because some people have never maybe even heard of the Rhine research. So some of our listeners may be, tuning in today and first finding out about it. So let's start at the beginning, which is when, why, and who founded the Rhine Research Center.
Well, that was a long time ago. Gail, I just want to say, I'm so happy to see you. I'm always happy to speak with you. And, talking about the Rhine is something I do quite often. So I'm hoping we can just have a conversation and just talk about things that we normally like to talk about. So, the Rhine, right?
Yes.
Back in the 1920s, about
Wow.
100 years ago, there was this man named b.rhine, and he was really he was interested in religion, but also in sciences. He was thinking about going to seminary school, but he got a degree, a PhD in biology, and he was at the University of Chicago with his wife, Louisa, who was also a PhD in biology in the 1920s. This is pretty advanced at that time. She was doing some amazing work as well. Well, one day there was a man who came into town to speak named Arthur Conan Doyle. We know him from the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, right? He wrote all the Sherlock, but this time he wasn't speaking about Sherlock Holmes. He was actually speaking about some work he had been doing with the Society for Psycho Research in the UK. It seems right after World War II, or I'm sorry, World War One, there was a big upsurge in mediums throughout the world. People were trying to get a hold of their loved ones who had passed away. They were really interested in getting messages to their loved ones and from their loved ones. And Arthur Conan Doyle was working with the Society for Psycho Research on mediumship and trying to understand, is this a real thing? they were looking at it from a scientific perspective. Well, J.B. Rhine was sitting in the audience that day, and he was so excited. He went home and he told his wife, I think I finally found a way to combine my interest in spirituality and science.
Wow.
And he began to look into the Society for Psychical Research and for different organizations and different researchers who were looking at mediums across the country and across the world. Well, for about the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, he had met a number of researchers, and one of them was this man named William McDougall, who was up at Harvard. He was a psychology professor who was
Mhm.
also president of the American Society for Psychical Research and was studying mediums. Well, JB had gone on some mediumship sessions with him and learned a little bit about what they were like. And McDougall called him up one day and said, hey, I'm going to this brand new university that's down in North Carolina called Duke University. I'm going to be the head of the psychology department, and I was wondering if you'd be interested in coming down, and you can work in the psychology department and study mediumship as well while you're there.
And
Well,
what year is
JB,
this now? Are we in
this was in
19?
1927.
Wow.
So
So
19
100 years ago.
it was almost 100 years ago that he and his wife took off from Chicago and ended up driving down through the backwoods and coming into Durham. And the story goes that as soon as they drove into Durham, his wife looked around and said, you brought me to a town that doesn't even have a bookstore. It was just this little town with this new university. But JB was really excited, and he was amazed to be studying with one of his mentors, William McDougall. And so he started working at the university, teaching psychology, and he wanted to know, is mediumship real? Are these people communicating with spirits? Well, the first thing he realizes, in order to do that, I need to determine, hey, what can people do? Can people, is there any sort of communication or ability that people have between each other that might look like they're speaking to spirits? So back then, when you went to a medium, it was real different than it is today, right, Gail? Back then,
Yes.
people would sit around the table and they'd put their hands on this table in a dark room, and the medium would come out, and it'd be really dark, candle lit, and there'd be horns flying in the air and noises and voices and faces, and it was entertainment more than
Mhm.
anything else. But JB realized when he went to mediumship sessions that some of the mediums were getting information that they probably shouldn't have known. He had no way of knowing how they got it. So he thought, well, are they actually getting that information from spirits? Is that coming from, like, my Uncle Joe who passed away sitting on their shoulder and whispering in their ear? Or is that maybe, are they getting information directly from me?
Ah.
Telepathy, mind to mind communication.
Mhm.
And, so JB was like, well, we have to know, is that possible before we can really tell if they're speaking to spirits? And he said, what other options? Well, maybe actually at my house. Uncle Joe's library is all set up with his smoking jacket and his bowling trophies, and they're able to see this from a distance. Clairvoyance, or
Mhm.
what we call now remote viewing. They're able to get information from a distance. Or maybe in about a half hour, I'm going to say everything there is to know about Uncle Joe. And they're able to get that information through time. They're able to see what I'm going to say. Precognition, getting
Mhm.
information through time. So JB said, before I can know if they're speaking to spirits, I have to know if these things are real. And so they created these ESP testing cards. What they were created by a man named Carl Zener, circle, wavy lines, and cross and square thing, and they started to use these to test people for what he was calling extrasensory perception. It included telepathy, mind-to-mind connections, clairvoyance, getting information about objects or events that are distant or hidden, and precognition, getting information through time.
Mhm.
So looking at these ESP cards, he found, hey, people did seem to be able to get this information. And it seemed that extrasensory perception was real. It was really happening. In 1935, he published a book called Extrasensory Perception. It became a New York Times bestseller, and Duke University said, you know what? You can start your own lab. And that started the Duke Parapsychology Lab at Duke University. So
And
that's
that
where it
was,
all kind of started.
so was that by 1930 or still in 27, 20, something like that?
The 1935 is when they opened the lab.
Hmm.
So he was doing his experiments from 1930 to 1935, and then they published. But he
Hmm.
continued doing work at Duke University up until 1965 for 30 years. He
And
continued working at Duke.
wasn't that very rare and unusual for a university to open up a department like that? That
It
wasn't
was
really popular in those days.
it was the first it was the first operating parapsychology lab in the country
Oh,
that was
wow.
associated with the university. Now, there were some other small projects that were done at different universities, like Stanford, University of Pennsylvania, but this was a continuously operating lab for 30 years.
Hmm.
And, JB was a very charismatic person, so it was very easy for him to describe this work. And he developed some great protocols that we still use today. Now, we don't use the ESP testing cards anymore. We do things a little differently. But we're still looking at very similar phenomena and trying to understand. Not only does it happen, because after so many years, nearly 100 years, we know that these events occur. We have a lot of evidence that they occur. The question is, how does it work? And why are some people better at it than other people?
No, I had the good fortune of being in the lab on the Duke University campus, and I was wondering, there was like a little museum there, and I was wondering if you could tell our audience, beside the Xeno cards, what other things was JB using at that time to try and see what people's abilities could be?
Right. Well, it started back in 1930 with the ESP cards, or the Zener cards, that from
Hmm.
Carl Zener. Um, but by 1935, the lab started getting popular. People started coming from all over the country and different parts of the world because it was the only academic institution that was
Hmm.
doing these tests and having good results from them. So they had one time, the story goes that this man came in who said he was a gambler, and he said, I can control dice. And when I want to roll the dice and have a number not come up, it will never come up. MJB was like, well, that's interesting, but we do things with cards. Can you do anything with cards? And he said, no, 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 I do it with dice. He said, okay, well, show me, because he was a scientist. And the guy starts rolling the dice, and he's able to do what he said. He was able to make control the roll of the dice. Well, JB thought, well, this seems to be something that we could study, and they started doing testing on PK, or psychokinesis. You might have heard the term telekinesis. It's an old term that was used in the past. We don't really use that in parapsychology anymore. Now we use psychokinesis, or PK, or mind matter interaction, being able to affect objects with your intention or your beliefs.
Hmm.
And so they started doing tests with dice for a long time, just rolling the dice, but they realized that they couldn't just hold the dice in your hand, because, if you watch some of the shows that were on Discovery Channel, you can see you hold them a certain way, you can make
Sleight
the
of
numbers you
hand.
want come up, right? So what they did is they started to create automatic dice rolling machines, and they had these apparatus that had little motors on them, and tumblers, and they'd put the dice in, and they'd roll them through this thing, so no one was touching the dice. They'd roll 100 dice at a time down an inclined plane, and because they found that when they used more, people seemed to be able to affect them more effectively. So they were able to impact them more better when there were more dice. So we have a number of different little contraptions that allow people to roll dice and in different ways. And for ESP testing, there were other devices they used as well that were things that were created by this man named Bill Cox. This man named Bill Cox, he was an engineer who was local to Duke University, and he used to hang out at the lab all the time. And he liked to build little machines, like
Fun.
Rube Goldberg machines, And he'd build
Right.
all these different machines where you had all these little, like, drink straws, like you might get at a bar for stirring drinks, but a bunch of them were in different colors. And he'd have them come down a little tumbler and try to make people separate them into different colors when they got at the bottom. He had really well balanced devices that had little metal balls in them, and he tried to
Oh,
make them move them to one side or the other and see if they could affect them. He had all types of little devices that he was creating for years and years. The problem was when Bill Cox would start to create these machines, he was a tinkerer, right? So he'd create this machine, they'd get it all set up, and they'd say, "Oh, let's do a test with it." And by the time they got ready to actually do an experiment, he was working on another machine, and he was stealing parts from his old machine to make the new one. So they never ended up using them. But it was, it was just a fun guy with the way he created all these devices. So many different ways until around the 1970s, things started to become more electrified and
hmm.
mechanical in nature. So they started going into computers and electronics much more. And this is where there was a man named Helmut Schmidt started
Hmm.
working on, he was a physicist who started
Sure.
working on creating random number generators. And
Ah,
then they would try to see if people could impact the random number generators and have them do things like make lights move in certain directions or keep a little spinning wheel moving on and on and on and on. So all of these little devices were used in different experiments around the lab. And in our museum, which you saw, we had a number of these different devices.
I wondered, when I did precognitive remote viewing, a random number generator is what selects the photo that's going to be shown at 3 o'clock.
Right,
You're describing it at 1, and I didn't know the history of how that number generator began.
right.
So when did J.B. Rhine die, and did he work up until his passing?
Yeah. So JB, he when he reached at that time, back when he worked at Duke University, there was a rule in academic environments that once you reach the age of 70, you had mandatory retirement.
Oh,
Well, JB, he was born in 1895, so when he reached 70 years old, it was 1965.
hmm.
He had been at Duke for 30 years, and he had to make room for the younger academics to get into the field at this point. So he knew that he was going to have to leave the university. And what he did is he started to gather up his researchers and gather up his materials and work towards forming a nonprofit organization. And he
Ah.
moved off campus in 1965 and took his research with him with Duke's blessing. They said,
Hmm.
"This is great." They had some funds that had been donated specifically for his lab. They granted him the funds and allowed him to create a separate organization he called the Foundation for Research on the Nature of Man. And part of that was the Institute for Parapsychology, which is where all of his research came with him to Duke, or from Duke. And so he kept that running for the next, it was from 1965 until about 1975. He said, "Look, I'm getting a little bit long in the tooth here. I need to start finding a replacement, someone else to run this place." And by 1980, he passed away. So,
Hmm. I
and
have to.
he's
I just wanted to share a quote with you from him that, not from him, but about him. I don't remember which researcher said this to me, but one of the researchers said, and this was like I'm talking about, the Ed May, Jeffrey, those groups of people. It was one of them. I
right.
don't know which
Our
one, Ed or
friends,
Jeffrey, but
our
people who
friends.
they
Yes.
said, right, our friends, they said, if you weren't fired by J.B. Rhine, you weren't a parapsychologist.
that
And that was all
that's
I knew about him. So I'm finding this fascinating.
right. Well, the one person I know who wasn't fired by JB Rhine was his daughter, Sally Rhine Feather,
Glad
who
to
worked
hear that.
right. She worked with him for a long time, and before he had a chance to fire him, she was like, "I'm getting out of town," and she left. But then she eventually did end up coming back, and she's still around today. She still comes to our research team meetings, of course.
I want to say that Sally is just such a beautiful soul inside and out. And I met her many years ago and we've stayed in contact, but she was the first guest on a small, medium, at large podcast. She was
Great.
guest number one. That was almost 5 years ago, and she has a few thousand views now of people who have watched her. And I have to have her on again very soon, so we'll have to check in with her after if she's up for anything like that. I,
Right.
which it brings me to another question I have in my history, because most of the questions I had about history you've already answered, so I
Oh,
won't have to ask you. But one of them was, were any family members involved, what their role was, and are they still involved today?
mhm. Well, as I said, Sally was one of the major. See, Sally, from the time she was a child, and I talk to Sally all the time, so she's told me these stories. That's how I know about
Yes.
these things. And so, from the time she was a child, she was born in 1930. So she's 95 years old now, 96 actually now, and she was born in 1930. The lab began operating in 1930, testing ESP. So she was right at the beginning. She's been
Born
in the
into
field
it.
of parapsychology as long as anybody is alive.
Yes.
So what she did is they would do things like whenever her friends would come over the house, they would do ESP tests with them. They would I have there's pictures of her at her like 14th birthday party with a big dice rolling machine where her and her friends are sitting around the living room rolling dice and trying to make it come up um, to certain numbers. So she's been involved with this at the same time. And this is really interesting is that her mom, who, as I mentioned, was a PhD in biology as well. They were both botanists, her J.B. Rhine and Louisa Rhine. And when J.B. came to Duke, Louisa, being a good wife, she stayed home, took care of the kids, but her mind was
Mhm.
always working. And she was really interested in finding ways that she could contribute to the lab. Well, she wasn't hired by the lab, but what she was able to do, JB had, because it got so popular, there were people writing letters to the lab, telling stories. Oh, let me tell you about my experience. Let me tell you what happened to me, and really interesting stories. And he said, I don't have time to answer all these letters. And Louisa said, give them to me. Let me see if I can answer some of these letters. Let me write back to these people. And she started to not only reply to give people some comfort, but she also, being a biologist, her mind went into classification. So she started
Oh.
taking these letters and classifying them as different types of letters. Did they happen when people were awake? Did they happen when they were asleep? Did they happen whenever they were? Is it telepathy? Is it clairvoyance? What type of experience is it? And she actually started writing her own research papers, which were published in the Journal of Parapsychology, starting in the 1940s. She became so versed in the experiences that people had. JB was doing the lab work, really controlled and carefully structured experiments, whereas Louisa was at home and or in her office in the lab, and she's going through all of these letters and learning about the way people are experiencing this in their daily lives. She
What a
wrote some
team.
really, really interesting articles on this.
What a team. She was exploring the experiencers, and he was exploring the scientific protocols to prove what the experiencers were doing.
Yes,
What a husband and what that's a power couple.
no kidding. And as I said, they were both PhDs at that time, and they were doing unique work. There was no one else studying these fields in this way. Now,
Yes.
JB's dream was to have people in universities around the world studying this. And so this
Mhm.
is one of the reasons, Gail, that JB would fire researchers from his lab. He'd be like, go off and do this somewhere else. Get out of here. Stop doing it my way. Make your own path. Follow your own way. And he was very successful at that, obviously.
He knew, and he had great students to do that with. I in fact, and one of my questions, which might be the right time for this, is the research and education going on today something that J.B. Rhine would be proud of?
Well, I hope so. I hope so. I've been the executive director for 15 years, and I have had mentors throughout this entire time from Sally, who was with parapsychology for so long, and she's given me different directions and helped me to resolve different questions I had. But also from so many people in the field, because of the fact that there are so many people who knew of the Rhine, who were
Mhm.
excited about the Rhine continuing. Because it's been the Duke Parapsychology Lab turned into the Institute for Parapsychology in 1965. And then in 1995, on JB's 100th, would have been his 100th birthday, they renamed it the Rhine Research Center. So we're the
Oh.
evolution of the original Duke Parapsychology Lab. We're not associated with Duke University anymore, but we are the evolution. And one of the things that JB, his message towards the end of his life was the work must go on. We must continue doing the work. And so trying to maintain the labs. And one of the missions I have for myself, when I was looking and interested in studying parapsychology, I didn't know where to go. But the Rhine happened to be where I was living at the time, so I was like, I can go there and I can learn more about what this is, and I can do my work there. I want to give that opportunity to more students, more people who are interested in this phenomena. And so the education center that we've developed is designed to try to bring more people in and give them a place where they can learn from
Mhm.
professionals who are in the field about how to study parapsychology, not teaching them to be psychic. I mean, we have
Mhm.
some courses where we use the science to kind of guide people and help them to learn more about remote viewing, to learn
Mhm.
more about developing intuition or out of body experiences. But the overall message is if you want to study these phenomena as a scientist, you can study that through the program that we've developed at the Rhine. So I hope that JB would have some sort of recognition that what we're doing moving forward is trying to live to is continuing, the work continuing and going on.
Well, from what I'm seeing, he would be tremendously pleased because you, as director, has also now made it more of a global reach where you've gone out and expanded, being able to have other people from other countries and all over the world part of the center or engage in taking a class or become a parapsychologist. So I think he should be glowing wherever he is. And who knows, maybe he does have a hand in some of the things that are going on. We don't,
Right.
we're not sure, right?
Well, I hope that wherever we're going, that we can continue going in this direction and bring more people into the field.
So I'm going to ask you one more last question about the history of Rhine and JB, and then I believe, let's see, every question I had you answered in part of your answer of the original question. So,
Like I said, Gail, we're just going to talk to each other
yeah, oh
today, right?
yeah, that's how all my interviews here go. What what in your opinion, or maybe in JB Rhine's opinion, was his greatest accomplishment?
When if I were to consider individual projects or individual findings, I really think the major impact he's had on our culture and on
Mhm.
society is to show that there is a way to scientifically study phenomena that we thought was magic before. We all believed this was kind of people have had experiences and they're like, this is really weird, these weird
Mhm.
coincidences that happen where you might have a dream about a friend and then you find out they have the same dream about you. All of these weird things that will go on in our lives, or it used to be where someone was calling before they called you on the phone. All of these things we always thought this is weird, it's magic, there's something weird going on. He found a way to bring this into a lab
Mhm.
and describe these experiences in the way that scientists would understand. This is one of the things that I think is most important for people in our field. Being able to speak to experiencers and describe to them the scientific foundation for what they're experiencing, and being able to speak to scientists and scientifically describe the experiences so they can relate to them. One of my goals is in this area is to continue to be I feel like I'm like a translator, an interpreter.
Hmm.
speaking between people who are having the experiences and the scientists. Because there's a lot of things that we feel are real, but if we can't describe them in scientific terms, scientists are never going to believe us. Researchers will never believe us. And we might even be fooling ourselves. And that's what JB was able to do. Separate when we're fooling ourselves from when it's something that we can actually repeat and see over and over again.
So I could see his groundwork, what he did really laid the paths for the scientists that I've worked with as a subject in experiments,
Oh yeah.
because that work is being carried on in labs, trying to with scientific double blind, whatever the protocols are, and he was really the first person to start that way for all the future scientists. So
Right.
he's really like the daddy of them all, it sounds like to me.
Well,
And
within the U.S. at least, and within
yes,
academia, and
yes.
people that you've worked with, like Russell Targ, like Dean
Hmm.
Radin, and there's so many people that you've worked with, Stan Krippner, they all recognize the importance of having the scientific foundation that JB created.
Yes, said that he was the man. And so that was everything I wanted to know about the history. So I wanted to go on next to your job, education, current activities. So unless there's anything else you want to say about the history, I have to say I've never actually listened to the history. And so for me, I just learned a whole bunch of things that I was really happy to be knowing about. And I loved when you mentioned about his wife collecting all the different stories of different people. And then Sally wrote that book called The Gift.
Right.
And The Gift was when I met her was just when that book came out. And so I sent her a whole bunch of my stories, and she said that had she received those stories before she had published the book, she would have put them in there, and that she keeps a file of me somewhere in the Rhine. So I know I'm in a file there. There's a cabinet or something somewhere, an online that has a file of me there, and I'm even more proud now that I know what the history is. And I was also very grateful that 14 years ago, I was there on the Duke University campus and I spoke for the Rhine Research Center about Mongolian shamanism and the Huichol peyote ceremony, which I see is still on your site and it's had 500 views. And I didn't realize, though, that it was 14 years ago. When I went to look it up, I thought, oh, yeah, that was a little while ago, but years went by really fast. And I
Well,
certainly didn't.
that was when I met you, and it was just about the time that I came to the Rhine. It was right
Yes.
after I had gotten to the Rhine.
So we've really been following each other through these years of the things that have been happening. So I was wondering if you could just explain your job and what you're doing right now as executive director and head of education. And from that, I'd like to talk about some current activities and research going on right now.
So my job.
Yes. What does an executive director do?
What doesn't an executive director do is more appropriate statement. Anything that isn't getting done that needs to happen. So one of the things as the executive director, I feel that my role is I'm a caretaker for the reputation and the integrity of the organization,
Mhm.
and so maintaining the scientific foundation for the organization is essential. So
Mhm.
I've studied research. I've done my own laboratory studies. I recruit other people to do their laboratory work within the Rhine as well, and to help us to explore these phenomena. We've gotten past this point of, hey, does it happen?
Right.
Does ESP happen? The Journal of Parapsychology started in 1937. It's nearly 90 years old. We have a lot of peer-reviewed evidence to support, and some of it doesn't. But most of it supports the idea that ESP happens, that
Yes.
PK happens. There's a lot of evidence for survival. The fact that people are able to. There's something about our personalities, our soul, our spirit, whatever you might call it, that continues to exist after our physical body is no longer here. And so, with all of these in place, we want to know, how does it happen? We want to
Hmm.
understand, is there a mechanism that we can explore, that we can figure out how it happens? What are the psychological traits that contribute to this occurring? What state of mind? Like, do people are people able to do better in the lab if they're hypnotized?
Hmm.
If they do meditation a great deal, do they do better in the lab? Um, what does belief have to do with it? I always thought we always talk about belief and say, well, if you believe that you're going to do well on an ESP test, you're more likely to do better in the lab on the ESP test. But that's
Hmm.
true about pretty much everything in our life, isn't it?
Hmm.
If
And
you
intention.
believe, yeah, if you believe you're going to do it, you're more
Hmm.
likely to do it. I always use baseball analogies because I played baseball for a while. If you go up to bat and you believe you're going to hit the ball, you're more likely to hit it than if you don't believe you're going to do it. If you think you're going to fail, you're more likely to fail. So it's the same way with ESP, or with this psi phenomenon, we call it, that we
Hmm.
study. All of these things there's different things that contribute to making it happen and making it more likely to occur. So this is what we're trying to do in the scientific realm.
Hmm.
At the same time, there's people who walk in all the time and they're having experiences sometimes that are so phenomenal. It just blows your mind to listen to people and what they're experiencing. I had one woman who came in one day and she's saying, when I'm sitting at home and I'm watching TV and distracted by something else, subtitles will start appearing on my TV and it'll be what I'm thinking about. And I'm like, wait a minute. is
Wow.
and the first thing you wonder is this really happening? Or is this person imagining it? But there's ways that we can bring this into the lab and start discussing this with people and say, hey, look, these sorts of phenomena, yes, people can have effects on electronics. What you're describing, I've never seen before, but let's do some tests and let's see if we can see it happening. So, trying to help people feel comfortable with their experiences, understand that they're not unique in a lot of cases. People
Hmm.
have dreams about things that are going to happen. It doesn't scare them anymore when they know that other people have the same kind of dreams. We have a
Exactly.
community that they talk about dreams. We have a dream group at the Rhine. We have another group that does remote viewing at the Rhine. It helps people to learn more about how to do remote viewing and understand their remote viewing experiences. And a psychic experiences group, which is a group of people who get together once a month. They've been doing it for probably close to 20 years now. They've been getting together once a month and they discuss what their experiences are with other people. There's a lot of people, I've seen this happen, will come to this meeting and they'll first time at the meeting and they'll kind of sit in the corner and kind of sit in the back and not and have their head down and be listening, and the group will start talking about experiences, and as they start describing their experiences, you'll see this person just start looking up every once in a while until eventually you start noticing them looking around, and then by the end of the meeting they're saying, I'm home. I could never talk about these things to anyone before. I can feel like I can speak about this honestly and openly, and no one's going to tell me I'm crazy, I'm nuts. I can really have a conversation about this. Gail, do you remember the first time that you've had that sort of experience where you felt like you could speak about these things?
Well, well, that was that. I'd say that was a little while ago, but the feeling of relief in finding the camaraderie of other people, it's not a competition. Are you more psychic than me, or can you do a better remote viewing? It's more a feeling of like, oh, we both could do this. This is
Right.
so great. And I'm not alone. And I have to say, it doesn't even matter that I got that kind of validation, 20 or 30, maybe 20 years ago, but it's still occurring like when we just were together at that Acorn conference. And I'm
Yes.
listening to some of the other speakers, and it's like coming, the same thing would be coming out of my mouth. You just changed the name, and it was so, and it was like, how could you? I thought my story was a little bit unusual, and then you're hearing about, oh wait, they did this too, and this, I don't know, we sometimes we call it misery needs company, but this is not misery. This is a validation, and it's such a relieving feeling, and the support that it gives you when you get this, for me, is invaluable. So, and I'm trying to do this now with other people, like lately, and I don't think of myself as a teacher by any means, but I've had people that have come to me and they've wanted to learn uh, something I just learned to do, which is the telekinesis, moving the paper in the bell jar that's back there.
Ah. Hmm.
Well, I found that I was able to share this with other people that came here, and I showed them, well, this is what I do. I said, just sit down and try it. And they walked away thrilled that they could move this paper. I'm not sure, but I'm like, I'm not a scientist. I never know why the things happen. It never matters really to me. It's just to me, it's like, oh, I'm seeing it before my eyes. I'm seeing it. I know for me, it's real. I know a
Yes.
skeptic can say, you cannot do that, or it can't be done, or it's the heat, or it's the temperatures in the room, or whatever things they come up with. I know for my own self that I did those things and that they are real. And when I find that I can have a conversation with someone doing the same thing, or I'm able to actually show someone what I just learned to do somehow, and they can just do it, to me, I don't know, that's wonderful. I love that experience.
Well, it gives you a sense of peace because you know you're not alone.
Right. And you're
You're
not
not
crazy.
and you're not crazy. Yeah. Well, that doesn't make you crazy. Other
No,
things, all right.
maybe. Well, I've never wanted to be normal, so
Right. But the so these so there's so many, this idea of the PK and what you're talking about, spinning this little piece of paper in a jar. We had someone who was doing this who came to the Rhine a number of years ago, and she was a woman from Canada, and she was spinning. We had a little jar set up, and she was spinning what we call psi wheels
Mhm.
inside of jars, and we actually brought her into the lab and demonstrated that she was doing this. She could control it. She could make things move one way, stop it, move it the other way, stop it. And she could, I mean, the fact that she could control it was a big deal. It was really an amazing thing.
I first of all, I didn't know that I could do this until Russell Targ told another physicist, George Weissman, "Oh yeah, Gail can do that." And when George Weissman contacted me, he said, "Russell said you can do it." I said, "I can't do that," but I said, "I'll try." So I always approach anything they present to me with I don't do it, but I'm happy to see if I can.
Mhm.
And then when it happens, the amount of joy I feel inside, it's because you're seeing something in the material showing you what you're doing in the invisible.
It's impossible. You're doing something that's
Yes.
impossible.
And what I did learn from it, because I've only been doing this for the last a year and a half, what I have learned is that when I practice it every day, it becomes stronger and stronger.
Mhm.
And when I've tried it in different emotional states, there are different states where it seems to be, like if I'm in a really happy, ecstatic-y sort of state, it seems to work more, or there are different emotional states where it seems to react more. But I'm finding it as like a teaching tool, and I'm saying, well, what's it like when I try this and I'm not thinking about it, or I don't put my intent, or I get 2 feet away from it, or how can I? So I've been playing with this, and it's teaching. I feel like the object is teaching me things as I'm relating to it, and also that I really didn't think that I could do this sort of thing, but I've
Mhm.
had children come in here, like 5 different children. 2 of those 5 different children could do it instantly. I can't
Amazing.
tell you why those children could do it instantly and the other 3 children couldn't. And I don't care, but
Right.
because I'm not a scientist. All I care is that, wow, it happened. But I think that. um, it's such a visual thing that science can't deny. But I'm sure they'll
Well,
figure out a way. But
no, 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 no. This is the thing. And so the you were talking about, being in different states of mind and different moods and things, that has such a large impact on this sort of thing. And
Mhm.
there's a man named Jim Carpenter who's a psychologist. He's been involved with parapsychology since the 1960s. He's been doing this for a really long time. He's a friend of mine. He lives down the road. About 10 years ago, he worked with this woman I was telling you about. Her name is Shirley Black, and she's from Canada. And she was able to spin this wheel, and she used this as kind of a therapeutic method for her to help her to deal with some trauma she had in her life. And
Mhm.
what he did is he had her track her moods and what was going on with the device. And they published a paper in the Journal of Parapsychology together on mood and emotion and moving wheels within jars. So that was about 10 years ago. You can find it on our website on where we have the Journal of Parapsychology published.
So how would I find it? What would I look up? Her name?
We have the Journal of Parapsychology is published by the Rhine, and it's published under Parapsychology Press. So if you go to parapsychologypress.org, you'll see over 20 years, close to 25 years of the Journal of Parapsychology listed there. And you can access them and you can find different articles by different researchers.
So tell
So
me the name of the researcher again.
it's
So I'm
Jim
writing it down.
Carpenter
Jim Carpenter
and Shirley Black.
and Charlie Black.
Cheryl Lee.
Oh, Charlie.
Cheryl.
Oh,
And
Cheryl.
my Pittsburgh accent comes out every once in a while.
Well, I got the New
Cheryl.
York one here.
Right, right. We're a pair, right?
Cheryl Lee. So,
But what we found that when she came down to the Rhine and she did this in our lab, we're like, okay, this is like you were saying, it's impossible, but it's happening. So she gave a talk for us and a little workshop on how to build these devices so you could test your own
mhm,
PK.
mhm.
And so we had a group of people in our library, about 20 people, and she starts doing it. And she goes, here's how you build it. And everybody's building their own. And then she said, okay, here's how you make it spin. It's catchy. When one person does it, other people start doing it too. It seems
Oh.
that and so when you're demonstrating it for someone, for some reason, they start to believe it can happen. And this is what happens with kids. Kids don't know it's impossible. They just see it happening and they're like, oh yeah, that's how it happens.
I thi- and that's what exactly what so exactly what the and these were kids aged from like 9, I think, to about 12, something like that.
Hmm.
And and I loved seeing the look on the child's face when they did it. And it was I mean, I just anyways, it was I didn't even know that I would do these sort of things, but I'm really pleased to have them come to the house and be able to share whatever it is that I'm doing in this little office here. I do have the Epler wheel, uh,
Eggly wheel.
Egler, is that it?
Yeah.
And I haven't had as good of a result with that as I do with paper. So I'm working on I do when it's not in the jar, but when I put the jar over it, and I have had that experience when I practiced where I was able to say, okay, I want you to move to the right now, and it would move to the right. So I did find that the wheel that Eckler, that one,
Eggly. Eggly wheel.
Eglery, that wheel I had much more control over direction.
Uh-huh.
Where the paper, I didn't have as much as a control like that. But with the paper, when I was doing my most intense, where I was doing it every day, and then I decided one day to see how long could I sustain the paper moving. And I was able to do it for 30 minutes. Keep it moving back this way, forward this way, back this
Wow.
way. And I was just so involved that I didn't know how much time had passed. But
Right.
I knew to write it down. So I keep a little booklet of every time I do it. The children are in there, the date they do it, and how much the response is. Not that I'm planning to write a paper or anything, but it's just for me to keep like a history of
So
this
keep
little.
note of your mood
I
and your
think I'll add
emotions.
mood now to it.
Mood and
Yes.
emotions. That can have a big that's what Cheryl Lee was doing. And
Yes.
looking at that data with Jim Carpenter, they found different results related to her mood and the
Well,
way she felt at the time.
I'm going to add mood to my column.
So I'm gonna give you some advice related to
Yes.
putting the Egley wheel in that jar because we do these studies at the Rhine. We've
Yes.
done experiments with this. Um, Sometimes static can have an impact on the movement, and with paper especially static. If like we had someone who was trying to move paper and also aluminum foil, like little
Hmm.
pieces of aluminum foil that were balanced on a pin.
Yeah, I've done that one. Yeah.
And this person was having some trouble doing it, and it was in a shielded environment. And one of my colleagues who was in the office was walking by, and it was winter time, and she had her scarf on, her wool scarf. As she walked by, everything followed her, and everything went
Oh,
back. So the static was causing it to move. Well, the
through
Egley
the
wheels
jar. Through the jar?
through the yes, the static from her scarf was so strong, from the wool scarf was so strong, it caused it to move back and forth. So we knew we need to be careful that static is not responsible for it. But with the Egley wheel, it's less likely to have an impact on the movement because of the way it's created and what it's made out of.
Hmm.
But what we found is that sometimes the static that might be in the jar can restrict movement. It can hold it in place. So you know what we do? We can remove the static. You take one of those dryer sheets that you use for anti-static and just
Yes.
wipe the inside of your jar, and it removes all the static from it.
I'm writing this down. Okay. Wipe jar with dryer sheet.
Yeah, the anti-static sheets that you get at the store, and then when you put the jar over it, you're not going to have static interference, and the
Got
wheel
it.
will spin more freely at that point. These are little tricks we learned like I said, I've been doing this for 15 years at the Rhine. These are little tricks we learn along the way on how to make
All.
these things, make them work, and and you know what we do? We listen to the people who are having the experiences.
Hmm.
When you talk to people, so many scientists, researchers, they get this idea of what their research should look like and what their experience should look like, and then they design this experiment to match exactly what they want it to do and exactly what they want to see, and then they bring people in and they say, okay, come on in here and let me wire you up with different things to
You're
monitor
wired
you and
up.
let me put blindfolds on you and everything. Okay, now sit there and be psychic. Worst situation you can imagine, right? Want people to be relaxed. You want them
Hmm.
to be comfortable. You want them to feel like you're there with them. You're not testing them with a lab coat on. And so finding when you talk to people and you listen to them, instead of creating a research experiment that's exactly what the scientists think, you create one that's more like what the experiencers would be comfortable with. You can still control it. You can still find ways to make it very carefully blinded and scientific, but make people comfortable and have them doing something that's normal for them.
I've been saying something that I'm not, going to do any scientific research or anything, but I have been wondering why after I have, and this started way back in 98 when I started doing remote viewing for Dean Radin and Russell Targ. When I would finish the remote viewing sessions and have a really positive experience, and this would be down in Palo Alto, I would be left with a tremendous amount of sexual energy. Not when I had a negative thing, like where I would be doing it and I didn't hit the target.
Hmm.
And it's over and over and over again that something of excitement, like something excites me when I've hit the target or moved the paper or given, been in the Faraday cage and done some effects on the photons that I've done or any of these kind of things. Afterwards, I'm charged like in a sexual, energetic way. And I've never had anybody discuss this. And I think that there's something to this I would be interested. Did other experiencers, so I'm just throwing that out you
Well,
at
it's
you.
yeah, yeah, you're throwing it out at me. Yeah, well,
Like, how do they
it's
feel, these other people afterwards?
well,
Do
it's
any of them
clear
mind
it's exciting your passions, Gail,
that? Uh-huh.
and you're just feeling you have such a sense of accomplishment, and it's like wow, this is amazing, and you want to share it with other people, right?
Yeah, I feel like I'm being seen.
Yes. Well, and sharing it is a big when these things happen, when I've been doing things and we have spoon bending parties and when I bend a spoon and stuff, I'm like, "Hey, look, the spoon bend,"
And
You
it
know?
doesn't matter if I've done it before. It feels
No.
always like it feels new and fresh each time. I've never had this attitude like, oh yes, I can bend the spoon anytime I want, or I can do any psychic thing anytime I want. I always feel like it's a magical, still I feel it's a magical, special moment. And I don't know if it's going to happen. And when it does, I have such a feeling of comes up deep inside my gut, and it's a feeling of tremendous joy and tremendous amount of energy.
And
But
I think people feel this for any major accomplishment that they
mhm,
have in their lives when they're successful, that it's amazing the sense of ecstasy that it can bring to you.
right,
I,
ecstasy,
I get this.
passion.
Yeah, even I know this is kind of weird, but when I'm doing a study and I'm doing an experiment, I go through months and months of planning and designing and reviews and get everything ready and get all the equipment, get everything together, and then we do the experiment and when we get the results that we were looking for, my first thought is this is impossible. There's no way this couldn't have happened. But I've been playing. It's exactly what I was expecting. But I'm like, no, I must have done something wrong. It's impossible. But when it happens again, that's when it's like I get this sense of ecstasy because it's like it's not. It's still here. It's this sense that all of this amazing, impossible thing just happened. I
And
need to share this with people and let
yes,
them know.
and sometimes it's not repeatable.
Yeah.
And I had this, which I didn't know what anomalies meant, but this is my lack of education. But uh, I did this experiment, the double slit experiment for
Right.
Dean with the photon machine. And he had what we call an anomaly. He told me I had an anomaly. I really didn't know what that meant. And it was that it's an unusual thing to happen out of nowhere. But instead of just interfering with the photons, I took out all the electricity at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And he wrote it all up and said, this is an anomaly. They took some pictures or whatever. And I appreciated the acknowledgement. I don't know that I could ever do that again or what exactly happened. It was a one-time thing. And I was too involved in the amount of energy it took me to make it all happen to even wonder afterwards about how good it was or wasn't good or did it. So an anomaly. It affected all the electricity in the area. So I
Well,
want to
and
move
so that and
on.
this is actually related to some of the research I do at the Rhine
Uh-huh.
because we look at people affecting electronic instruments, and it's you'll meet people throughout your life that say hey light bulbs blow out for me all the time. You
My
know,
I didn't have to write questions because you're answering them all. It's like we're completely in tune here. So that was my question. And with it came, what is we talk about PK, we talk about healing, and both of these involve when you speak to experiencers, they'll all talk to you about energy.
right.
So can you talk about the energy in healing and PK type work? And is it the same energy? Do the people say to you, "Oh, the same energy that I use to do healing is the same energy I use when I'm doing PK?" Or what have you learned about energy involvement in these both areas?
Well, so anytime you're talking to healers, they discuss. This is really interesting. Is out of all the places I've lived, and I lived in a number of different places, Durham, where I am now, there are more people around here who say they do healing than anywhere I've ever lived before.
Oh,
I
I
meet
thought that was
people all the time and they
California.
say, well, this is what it's like, right? It's like you walk up, you're hanging out with people, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm a healer. Oh yeah, I do energy healing. And, it's like, so, and this has been something I've been interested in my whole life too. So I was interested in learning more about what their experiences are because so many people do different things when they do healing.
Hmm.
There's so many different approaches to it. Everything from people doing Reiki, healing touch, using the Bankston method, using um, hands-on healing. There's so many different ways that people do healing. But I wanted to know: is there something underlying it? Is there something that is similar about all of these people's experiences, the way they approach it? And a lot of people talk about this biofield. And the human biofield, the way that it's described, and NIH, the National Institutes of Health, now describe the human biofield as well as a, a secondary energy body besides the physical body that can have an impact on health. And sometimes healers are talking about treating this energy body in order to
Hmm.
affect health in the body. I tend to look at it a little differently. And not all healing approaches see it the same way. This secondary or energy body is not separate from the physical body. It is one thing. It is part of our health. And this and not a lot of this idea that there is a separate energy body is all focused around the idea that we are individuals. But
Okay.
if you look at different traditions, and if you especially look at some of the Eastern traditions and Eastern medicine and Eastern religions, this idea that we are individual and separate from each other is an illusion.
That's
This
right.
is the goal of many of the religions, is to acknowledge and know that this is an illusion and that this connection, there's connections between all of us. This is where my main interest is in the field of parapsychology, is the connections we have with each other and
Hmm.
with the world around us. And so when we're talking about these energies, I'm not thinking about you're sitting over there and you have an energy body and I'm going to treat it. No, I'm
Hmm.
thinking we're all part of this same energy, this same field of whatever it is. And so I'm not going to speak about it in terms of a singular biofield. And when I started to look at these different mechanisms that people describe for healing, they all kind of came back to first thing I do is I calm myself and then I make a connection.
Hmm.
It's recognizing that connection that is the beginning of a healing process. And then how do I understand what this connection is? Can we find a way scientifically to measure this? This is where we start looking at people and we start saying, okay, when people are doing healing, they describe different ways that they experience an energy.
Hmm.
Some of them describe it like they're experiencing something that tingles, like electricity. And when you talk to people who do Reiki or healing touch, they often talk about this energies through the body, and there's blockages at different points. And they need to release these blockages to allow the energy to flow through the body more easily. But it feels like there's an electrical signal, and our bodies are electrical, right?
Hmm.
Our whole nervous system is electrical, and so we know there's electricity in the body. When people are doing healing, though, and this energy that we have in the body, the electrical energy in the body, when we try to measure it, we have to be like right on the skin. We have to put the sensors right against our skin to measure any electricity in the body. If we even get just a few millimeters away, it starts getting really weak. We can't detect it anymore. It's kind of gone after we go
Oh.
any distance away. But healers, they don't work right against the body with their hands right on a person. They're oftentimes working from a distance, sometimes
Exactly.
from just a few, half a meter or so, sometimes from multiple meters, sometimes from halfway around the world.
Hmm.
And yet they're still doing their healing activities.
Hmm.
So it doesn't seem like it's that electricity.
Hmm.
Well, they say oftentimes, well, I feel whenever I have my hands over someone, it's being drawn to some area. And then whenever the healing's done, it kind of pushes me away like magnets do. Magnets draw to a certain area and then repel at certain
Mhm.
times. So it feels kind of magnetic. Well, anytime you have an electrical field, this is physics, you got an electrical field, you have a magnetic field that goes around it. So we know that in our bodies, there's this electrical field, there's magnetism in our body as well. There's magnetic fields. But again, to measure them, we have to have the sensors right against the body. You know, there's so many magnetic fields around us that if you get even the slightest bit away, it gets lost in the sea of all the magnetic fields that are around us. And you lose the signal completely. So it doesn't seem like the healers are using magnetism either.
Mhm.
So we start looking at other things like maybe, heat and whether that has an impact, or, different ways we can measure different subtle energies of the body, but none of them seem to correspond real well with what we consider the healing effect. So there's a man named Bill Joines who was working at Duke University with a man named Steve Bauman, and they started looking at light. They were engineers at Duke University, and they were light engineers, and they thought, well, maybe
Mhm.
light is this energy. So they created this lab called the Bioenergy Lab. And this is the lab that I've been working at the Rhine for 15 years now. What we do is we measure ultraviolet light. We have a really, really dark room, and that's inside another room that's a dark room. So it's separated from the outside light twice. It's what we call a double dark room. And we have
Wow.
a tremendously sensitive piece of equipment in there called a photo multiplier tube. It will measure a single photon, one photon of ultraviolet light every half second. It's like no light at all. So when I have this room all completely dark and I have the equipment set up, we'll usually see about 3 to 5 photons a second in this room. It's like nothing. It's dark.
Mhm.
First of all, ultraviolet light's invisible. We can't see it. But there's not very much of it in the room anyway, so we're not seeing anything in the room. If I bring a person in, anybody, doesn't matter who, and have them sit in front of this machine, that number jumps from 3 to 5 up to about 12 to 20 photons a second. Because we glow. All of us. We have a natural glow in the ultraviolet range. This isn't parapsychology. This is biology. Back
Mhm.
in 1970s, there was this man named Fritz Popp who started looking at light coming from organically grown fruits and vegetables and those that were not organically grown. And he saw a difference in ultraviolet light. And he was calling them biophotons at the time. And when people heard about it, they were like, wow, okay, Fritz is seeing the difference in the light coming from the fruits and vegetables, but who cares? What does it mean? We don't care. No one even paid attention to it. It was what we call fringe science. Well, let's fast forward from 1970. He continued his experiments for a number of years to present day. This is now being studied in upper level biology courses around the world, in Japan, in Italy, at Stanford, all over the world. These ultraviolet light emissions that come from all organic matter, from people, animals, plants, even just single cells release release this ultraviolet light. They don't know
What
where it
about
comes from.
rocks?
What's that?
Would rocks eliminate? Would rocks give off a?
Only organic matter. So
Mhm.
if it's not living in some way, I
Okay.
mean cells even they're living cells do,
Mhm.
and what they found is actually as animals they'll measure the photons around an animal. When the animal dies, the photons are still emitted, but they slowly disappear. And
Mhm.
slowly it goes down to zero. They're not emitting it at all. So life, it seems to be related to life. So biologists are interested to know, first of all, where is it coming from? And they say, well, it's a chemical reaction. It must have a release of energy somewhere because light is electromagnetic energy. But they don't know where it comes from. They can't find the source. Just know that it's there when people are alive, when animals are alive, but when it's not, when things are not alive, they're gone. The other thing they want to know is, what is it for? Why is it there? Why would the body create this? Why would organic matter create this? And this is what biologists have been looking at.
I wonder if it has anything to do with, sounds like almost a description when people say, oh, they have a tremendous life force energy. I wonder if that has anything to do with that. That's something that some people come in, they don't have as much of that. Other people have more. It's not something, it's something invisible, but it's
Right.
something people feel. And they
Exactly.
call it the life force energy.
Right. And so this is the question. Since it is electromagnetic energy, my
Uh-huh.
question was, hey, do people, when they're doing healing, do we see more of this? And so in our bioenergy lab at the Rhine, where we measure this ultraviolet light, we know that when people go in, we can see we can count the amount of light that's in the number of photons to see the amount of light in the room, which tells us how much energy is in the room. So I have them sit there and do nothing for a while. And, well, you bring a healer into a dark room and you say, sit there and don't do anything. What's the first thing they do? They start meditating. And so I have to distract them from that and tell them that I don't want them to start. I want them to just sit there. I don't want them to meditate. Don't just sit for a while. And so I have them do certain things to keep their mind busy. And then after I get a nice baseline reading, I say, start doing your healing. I bring in martial artists who
Oh,
talk
wow.
about chi running through the body's life force energy.
Hmm.
And I say, start doing your martial arts form. I bring in people who do meditation and talk about kundalini energies running through the body. And I say, start doing your meditation, whatever it is. I've had people come in there and do mediumship. People who have done, well, I've had a lot of different types of people in there doing ESP events. But my question is, when they're doing it, will I see more light than when they're not doing it, when they're just sitting
And
there? Will I see this energy? What I've found is that about 90% of the cases, and I've done hundreds and hundreds of these things in the lab, about 90% of them, I see nothing. I see the baseline, and it continues the whole time. But in
wow.
about 10% of the cases, I see a change in energy and change in light in the room. And when I'm saying I see a change in light, I'm talking about a baseline of about 12 to 20 photons. I'll see spikes up to 80 photons. This is 4 times the baseline. It's a big difference. It's really huge. But I've had some times where people have gone in, I see it go up to 300, 3,000, 300,000, and I have actually had 2 people go over 1 million photons a second.
Wow.
You don't need statistics to know there's something unusual happening in this room, right? So I have these people come in and I try to figure out when they're doing their work, how are they different from other people who are in there? I have had some professional healers who've been doing it for decades, who have great following and have great success, and they come in and I get nothing.
Uh-huh.
And I want to know why their approach to healing is it different from the approach that I get from other people? And could this light that I'm seeing be an indication of the energy that healers are feeling? Could it be an indication of chi that martial arts masters are feeling? Because
Hmm.
I've seen this quite a bit, and also with kundalini energy. Could it be these energies that people are describing? And what is it about the different approaches? With martial artists, it's really interesting. And I know you'll be interested in this because of your background.
Hmm.
When I have healers come in, I get readings all over the place. I'll get, big spikes and then nothing, go back to nothing, and then back up to big spikes and back to nothing. When the martial artists came in, I say start, and within a few seconds, the energy in the room goes up, and it stays that way. for like
Hmm.
12 to 15 seconds because they seem to have more control over the expression. It's not like they're throwing lightning bolts. It's like they're controlling the expression and then relaxing and controlling it and bring it up and relaxing. So this is where we start talking about actually being able to measure the energies that people talk about when they talk about healing and martial arts and meditation, and doing it with scientific equipment and studying an energy that's known in physics and biology. So we're able to describe it in a way that scientists can understand it. This is where I was talking about translating or interpreting the information. The experiences that people are having, can we interpret it in a way the scientists and the academic world will understand? And at the same time, try to understand why these people who are showing this great change in energy are different from the other people who are obviously healing, doing healing work, but why are they getting different results? It's not because they're not doing something. It's because what I'm measuring is not related to what they're doing.
Now, in that 10% where you had the tremendous photons, what was the commonness amongst those? Was there anything amongst those 10%? Like, were they all martial arts people, or were they some healers, some martial arts? Were they all women or men, or was there anything that you noted in that, when you looked at
Uh,
that?
Good, really good question. Men, women, uh, martial artists, meditators, healers, all of it's a mix.
So
I've even had
anyone
people
could
go. I've
anyone could
even
be in the 10%.
it seems that there's that it's not what they're trying to do,
Mm-hmm.
but as I started again, I was talking about you got to talk to the people who are having these experiences,
Right,
right?
right.
So you don't just sit down and do your experiment and then you're done. No, I find out. I asked them what happened in there. Tell me what you were doing. What was going on? And as I start speaking to them, I start to get a sense of the fact that we talk about healing as if there are different techniques, but healing's healing, right? You get better. It's not quite so simple. You can heal in so many different ways, just personally. You can heal physically. You can heal psychologically. You can heal spiritually. So many different ways that healing can be manifested in an individual. If you're looking for physical healing and someone is assisting someone with a trauma in their life, you won't even see it. So
Mhm.
we need to be able to explore not only what type of healing is occurring, not only the technique they're using, but the type of healing that they're exploring. Also, there's things like some people feel like they are performing the healing.
No,
I am healing that other person.
right.
Other people say, well, actually, I'm like a channel.
Hmm.
There's healing energy coming through me and going, and I'm facilitating the healing.
Hmm.
Other people, they don't feel like they're involved at all. They request healing of their guides, of their spirit, of God. They request that the healing be done, and they believe that God or a third party is performing the healing, and they are really just requesting it. So there are
Hmm.
different ways to look at who is the agent of healing as well. Besides this, when people are doing healing, you go to any medical doctor, right? You have different people who have different approaches. Some of them,
Hmm.
if you go to most traditional Western medicine, they're going to go and they're going to look and say, oh, they're going to have a directed approach. Like if you twist your ankle, they're going to go and look at your ankle and see what's wrong and treat your ankle and maybe put some ice on it or wrap it up. If you go to a holistic doctor and say, I got something wrong with my ankle, they're going to start asking you all kind of questions like, what do you do every day? Do you exercise? What are you eating? They're going to ask you things about who you are and you as a person holistically. So those are
Hmm.
different approaches to healing. And so there are different approaches we have to consider, the agent of healing, the type of healing, and looking at all of these different things and trying to determine what type of healing, what we might see from healing, and what energies might be applied. This is what I've been breaking down more recently. And what I
So
found
this,
is that people who do very directed healing,
hmm
who are very focused and conscious whenever they're doing it, and working locally in the same room with someone, those are the ones that I tend to see more light in the room with them as well. That doesn't mean the other people aren't doing something similar. It just
exactly.
means that these are the ones that seem to be having the most effect.
The one-on-one direct. I've done the different ones. I tend to feel more like your second explanation, like I'm just a vessel and the things are coming through me. That's how it feels
Right,
for me. But I
right.
agree that there's all different methods, and each person has some other different way that it does for them.
Yes,
And and I've never feel like I just don't feel that I can say I'm the one that's healing you. I just don't feel that doesn't sit with me correctly at all. But energy moving through me, yes, that feels
yes.
very for me. That feels very right. So we're getting down toward the we're actually over at an hour and 20 minutes because I'm having so much fun. So I just want to. I realize I can't go to the next 10 questions I have here to keep in our time, but we actually did discuss some of them with the PK I have here. We've talked about the healing energy and the different modalities. We talked about approaching healing methods. Ball jar, main. Oh, okay. So I have two last questions which I think will cover it. We didn't get to discuss poltergeist, but I'd
Oh,
love to have you on again because we have more topics to discuss. So we'll leave our poltergeist for the next time. But what
okay.
I do have is two more questions left. One is, do you think mainstream media is getting more open to accepting this paranormal phenomena now than, say, when you started 20 something years ago?
So I think with the onset of some more recent things that have been going on in the media, we're starting to see more people paying attention to what's going on in our field. There's some bleed over. Like, people are always, when they talk about parapsychology, people have different ideas of what it is. I kind of described ESP and PK and survival studies. But what people oftentimes throw in there is Bigfoot and UFOs and Loch Ness Monster and things like that. Is not what we're studying in scientific ways. And yet, people who learn about these things and TV shows, like when the X Files came on, a lot of people got interested in these things. Ghost Hunters got people interested in these things as well. They were not doing things in a scientific way, but it
Hmm.
made people who are interested in the science start exploring it a bit more. So we're getting more attention now because there's more of the scientific aspect coming out now, and more people are interested in different states of mind or different cognitive styles that might contribute to the way people, whether people are expressing ESP or not. So we're getting a little more attention now.
Hmm.
A lot of it is not quite on the research that we're doing,
Some
but
of it I find kind of, I don't want to say repulsive or negative or something like some of the things that I see in psychic representations in, you know, TV shows. It's all fictional, but
right.
still I find that somehow they seem to draw more toward a negative instead of a positive. And I would love to see more shows where they're showing all the positive things that happen in these experiences, not introducing fear or be scared or that kind of thing.
Right, and they oftentimes turn the psychics into superheroes too.
Yeah, or
you know,
right, something that you're never going to really be.
right? But so there are
But it's
more
getting
people who
out
are.
there.
Yes, right. Yes. So there are more people who are paying attention now. So we do have a bit more acceptance. In the academic field, there are people approaching it and they're not calling it parapsychology, but they're studying it from different directions.
Hmm.
And anyway, we can let the work continue, Any
Yes.
way we can get the message out there and let people know, hey, these are real phenomena. And what you're experiencing, you're not alone. It gives comfort to people.
Yes.
And this is the key. comfort,
Hmm.
and helping people to live their lives in a better way and not feel and be able to use all the capacities they have as well. Some people would deny that they're having dreams about things that are coming true in the future. But if they're able to recognize this and not be afraid of it, they
You
might be
know,
able to use it.
I'm just thinking of something Dean had said to me a couple of conversations ago, where they conducted some sort of a, I don't know if it was an experiment or survey or something, eh, looking for people who'd never had one experience ever. And that was hard to find, he said.
Wow.
It was actually harder to find that than, that where you'd say, no, nothing's ever happened in my life. That was harder to come by. So I'm
Right.
glad to know that. And I also find that it's usually around death where people start to have some experiences where they realize that they're more than what they realize, and that maybe their deceased person really did just come and see them at the edge of their bed. So it's
Hmm.
things like that where I find that they may be more open to it. So actually, I thought I had one question, but I had two because I have to have your words of wisdom at the end. So this is my last question before my words of wisdom. I knew we were going to have too much fun. If there's anything you want to tell for our listeners about, like, I just heard this year about the Psy Games, and there's things that about education and fun events. So if there was anything you wanted to say here, like, oh, there's this thing coming up, or anything like that that you want to share about anything about education and fun, before we go to your words of wisdom, which will
Yeah,
be my
well,
last question.
well, well, I'll talk about the Rhine because
Great.
we have the Rhine Education Center, which we just barely touched on, but we have courses that are offered every quarter. So every 4 times a year we offer courses, and we have courses that are starting up next month in May.
Hmm.
We have 5 different classes that are going to be taught, and they're related to things, everything from field investigations, going out and doing your own investigations, where you might be looking for spirits or different haunting activities, to general introduction to parapsychology, to human consciousness. And I'm teaching a course on 8 studies, where each week we take one of the key studies in the field of parapsychology and we
Uh-huh.
dig into it in detail. And
Yeah,
so these courses are starting next month and in May, and we do this 4 times a year. We've been running this school for 15 years now.
that's
And so we have
wonderful.
quite a few courses that are available. So people can go to rhineedu.org and they can find information about it there.
That's wonderful. And I don't really want to end, but our listeners only have a certain amount of time that they're willing to listen these days. You can't go too long. So I have to have you back. So I was just wondering if you wanted to share some words of wisdom or anything you'd like to leave our listeners with for them to think about.
Well, what I think about quite a bit
Okay.
is that these a lot of the research that we're talking about, and we talked about this idea of this separation between us being an illusion,
Hmm.
and the fact that we are all connected in so many ways, and a lot of our research demonstrates that there is more than just material world. We are connected in our not only our activities, but even our thoughts, our belief, our approach to life is having an impact more than on ourselves, but on the people around us. And that is growing and having an impact on everyone in the world. And
Hmm.
so by maintaining an attitude, recognizing that everything you do could have an impact on another person, having compassion, having good feelings towards other people, recognizing we're all in this together. This is what I think our research is demonstrating and bringing to the forefront and helping people to realize that these experiences you're having are an illustration of the connections between all of us. I'll leave it there, Gail.
That's very beautifully said. So I want to thank you, John, so much for being here today. And I look forward to having you on again so that we can talk about poltergeists and a few other items here we didn't get to talk about. though we did touch on a lot of the answer. I had a lot of questions, and you really covered them without me having to ask. So I'm very grateful for the connection we have. And I want to thank all the listeners who like, share, comment, and stick with us. We're starting our fifth year at a small, medium, at large podcast. And I want to say that the most important thing I find is I do believe we are all connected and that we should share our stories because when you share our stories, stories can heal. So have a great and wonderful week, listeners, and we'll see you again soon. And I want to thank you again, John, and the Rhine Research Center for all the work that you do. Have a
Thanks for
wonderful
having
week.
me, Gail.
Loved having and being with you, and I want to thank you. And we'll see all of you soon. Have a great, great week.